Welcome in to Locked On Knicks. Tom Thibodeau has extended for another 3 seasons, taking him through the 2027 to 28 season. What's his legacy look like with the Knicks so far? What can he still improve on? And what are the standards for Thibs going forward with the Knicks? Getting into all that right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks, and I want to thank you for making Locked On Knicks first listen today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in sights and sounds on YouTube. We appreciate you making us a part of your daily routine. Make sure you hit that auto download function on your favorite podcast app or the notification bell on YouTube so you never miss an episode. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. I'm Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site The Strickland, which you can find strict.land. And Tom Thibodeau, he is the chief of the Knicks for the extended future. There's still going to be a lot of Thibs in our lives for the coming years. Adrian Wojnarowski reports New York Knicks coach Tom Thibodeau has agreed on a 3-year contract extension that will take him through the 2027 to 28 season, sources told ESPN on Wednesday. So no report on the numbers. The Knicks don't usually report coach numbers. That might come out at some point, but probably unlikely. But I can assume, based off some of the coaching deals being handed out, that he's making in excess of $10 million a season, and maybe even more than that. So, but honestly, I don't really care about what the number is for Thibs because that is all just James Dolan's money. And so whatever Leon Rose wants to pay him, I think he's earned it at this point. Which let's get into the resume so far and where we're at with Thibs and what he's accomplished so far as a Knicks head coach. So first off, by partway through this season, I believe he will officially be the longest tenured Knicks head coach since Red Holzman, which is a huge accomplishment in and of itself. So that's thing one. I mean, just crazy that it's taken that long, since the golden era of the Knicks for a coach to be given this long of a leash to figure things out. And honestly, like, good on Leon Rose that he did give Thibs this amount of time to figure things out. I'll always be the first one to own my own, stupid takes or takes that aged poorly, one of which was like at the end of the 21 to 22 season. I know Gavin and I were both like on the, hey, it was great for one season, but I think Thibs has lost this locker room. I think this is about finito at this point. Like, let's get rid of this guy. Let's try to find the coach to move this team to a new level. And luckily, the Knicks did not heed our advice in that case, and ultimately kept Thibs, and he's had 2 really great seasons ever since. So overall, so far as Knicks head coach, Thibs is 175 and 143 as Knicks head coach. He has made 3 playoff appearances in 4 seasons. He reached the second round each of the last 2 years, and one could argue that he realistically could or should have made an Eastern Conference Finals appearance this season, if not for the huge injury toll. Obviously, we saw in that last game they got kind of blitzed early on by Indy when they were, quote, healthy as they were going to be, I guess, with OG Anunoby coming out and trying to do a Willis Reed impression with Josh Hart's, abdomen falling apart. And then, of course, Jalen Brunson breaks his hand. That was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back there. But I think even more impressive than just the straight record and what Thibs has, done as far as turning the ship around, just like getting the Knicks to the playoffs 3 times in 4 years and all that. He's overseen a lot of good player development. So, and, maybe we'll see this year. I know Johnny Bryant was sort of given a lot of kudos for what was happening with the guards because it seemed like he was always working really close hand in hand with, the guards on the team, whether that was Emmanuel Quickley or Quentin Grimes when he was playing well, or RJ Barrett. It was like a lot was given to Johnny Bryant as far as development goes. But no matter what, all this has happened under Thibs's tutelage. He's turned Mitchell Robinson into one of the best rebounding bigs in the entire NBA and one of the best defensive bigs in the entire NBA, which I don't think can go unnoticed. He's overseen Julius Randle turning into a two-time All-NBA player. I mean, he came in when Julius was, after his first season with the Knicks, not the most popular guy in town. A lot of people were not super in on the whole Julius Randle experience after one season when he was playing with rookie RJ Barrett and all that. And Thibs came in and, regardless of, I think Julius Randle obviously deserves a ton of credit for the amount of work that he put in and, the amount that he changed his game around that 20-21 season. But Thibs also put him in a position to, maximize that and turn him into a superstar by essentially making him the entire hub of the offense that year when the Knicks were definitely lower on talent overall than they are at this particular moment by far, and really needed a guy that could be the hub. Thibs figured it out with Julius and turned him into now a multi-time All-NBA player, or at least empowered him to become one. He oversaw Isaiah Hartenstein turning into a high-dollar center target and a bona fide starter, maybe to the chagrin of the Knicks. Thibs almost did too good of a job with Isaiah Hartenstein. So, I guess you could bemoan that one a little bit. He did too good. He does too good of a job with bigs and gets them big contracts elsewhere sometimes. But he did do that with Isaiah Hartenstein. This one will probably be polarizing, but he oversaw Emmanuel Quickley turning into a solid to possibly great starting NBA point guard. Now with Toronto, obviously was not starting with the Knicks, but I think for all the moaning that myself and Gavin and many Knicks fans did about Thibs' treatment of Quickley and all that, I think ultimately you could say, Quickley did turn into a better player in his time with the Knicks. So whether that was on Thibs or not, he ultimately did give him more of a role as time went on, to the point where the year prior to being traded from the Knicks, like myself and many people, thought that he should have been the rightful sixth man of the year. And so it's not like he gave him no playing time. He did give him enough to make a really solid six man of the year a six man of the year campaign. Then he maximized Dante DiVincenzo so much last year that he became a top 3 shooter in the NBA, just straight up by the numbers. Like, again, I know that Thibs wasn't taking the shots for Dante, but ultimately recognized fairly early on in the season that he was the better option to Quentin Grimes, sat Grimes down, and then, helped set up an offense where Dante was taking tons of threes every game, like 7-8 attempts per game and making, almost 40% of them, becoming one of the best shooters in the NBA in the process. So big time coaching there. He also, this one's kind of a joke. This one will, if Josh Hart happens to listen to Locked On Knicks, he'll enjoy this, but he played Josh Hart like a zillion minutes to end the season and somehow unlocked his 3-point shot against Philly, which was huge for the Knicks. I think Josh Hart, if given the chance, would not have played those zillion minutes based off his post-game interviews or whatever. But still, I think he's pretty good about, at this point, I've now fully gone out on the Thibs plays guys too many minutes thing. I think that he's good at identifying which players are able to play more minutes and letting them do so if it means that the team could win the game. And he did do a good job with like the Isaiah Hartenstein minutes restriction and all that, and making sure that he wasn't playing too many minutes. So I do think he's shown some growth in that area. And then, of course, I mean, he has coached Jalen Brunson, and so much goes to Jalen. Again, there's a fine line with development between the work that the player's putting in and the coach empowering them in just the right way. But he has coached Jalen Brunson as he's become a top 5 caliber NBA player. So I think Jalen Brunson has put in tons of work himself, but Thibs empowered him to, become this offensive hub that he is with the Knicks, and, tailored an offense to him to maximize his skill set. So I think he deserves some credit for that as well. Then the Knicks offensive and defensive per 100 possession marks since 2020 to 21. I won't belabor this point too much, but I think they've been really good. Third in defense, 26th in offense in 20 to 21, 11th in defense, 22nd in offense in 21-22, Then 22-23, 19th in defense per 100 possessions, but 11th in offense. And then this past season, clearly their best effort yet in the 50-win season, 10th in defense per 100 possessions, 7th in offense per 100 possessions for the Knicks this past season. So top 10 in both categories. So Thibs is kind of in his time. He started setting a culture. He's since, I think, legitimately reinvented himself as a coach and maybe as a person in some ways. He seems like he has a lot more fun than he ever used to as a coach now. But reinventing himself as a coach, I think he's done so much with how he approaches the game. Like defensively, I think he's mostly stuck to his guns and made things work with different personnel and all that. So, he's kind of played the drop coverage and tried to protect the rim at all costs, and that's sort of been his hallmark of his defense so far with the Knicks, which I think is fine. As long as you have the personnel to make that work. Having guys stick to their man, I think is fine. More so than switching everything, especially considering he loves having a traditional center out there at the five. To gobble up those rebounds. He legitimately turned he made offensive rebounding in style again. He turned it into a viable, strategy on offense again after teams had pretty much abandoned it, with the Golden State Warriors era, with their version of like the pace and space and, just getting up tons of threes. There was a lot of teams just kind of opting to take the three and then get back on defense and, not so much go for those offensive rebounds. And Thibs worked it in where, he was like, well, I can have offensive rebounding dominant centers. And that's more points that we're leaving on the table potentially. And that's why you saw like the Knicks in 22-23, especially, they ended up 11th in offense. And they were not a great shooting team that year. And it was because Thibs identified like, well, we're going to struggle a little bit shooting the ball. We should go for every offensive rebound. We can have some guys get back on defense, or be ready to, if it looks like, the rebound's not going to go our way, but let's utilize a guy like Mitchell Robinson and get as many offensive rebounds as we can. And we see now that formula make it really easy to plug and play guys into the center position with the Knicks, like Precious Achiuwa, for example, who struggled for a little bit, but once he realized what his role would be, was able to just dominate on the offensive glass in some of his appearances and, really make himself look like a player worth keeping on this team, which hopefully they do soon. If not, sign and trade him or whatever they're going to do to get the next great center prospect on this team. But, Thibs has done a really good job with that. And, also the big decision in 22-23 to go from the 10-man rotation to the 9-man rotation to make big seismic changes to the starting lineup, by around the 20 game mark or so, which he did in 22-23 by moving Quentin Grimes into the starting lineup and moving Evan Fournier out. And then obviously this past season by moving Grimes out of the starting lineup and moving Dante DiVincenzo in, he made some pretty big moves that ultimately affected the Knicks for the better towards the end of the season. So he's done a lot. He's done a lot to make this team better. He's done a lot to make himself better, but there's still room to improve. There's always room to improve. So I want to talk about some of the improvements I still hope to see from Thibs this coming season in just a second. But first, I have to remind you all that today's show is brought to you by Gametime. And, I don't know about you guys, but I love going to baseball games during the summer. I love going to Citi Field specifically as a Mets fan. And I love eating my way through Citi Field while watching some baseball. They got so much good food there. It's like, tickets are generally so inexpensive too. If you go to like a weeknight game, get in there for like $15 and then go just like get like $50 worth of food, which is not hard to do at a baseball game, but just go there and just pig out, eat so much of the good stuff that they have at Citi Field. That's one of my favorite summer activities. And Gametime is the place to do that. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. And prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. So with killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. And that's because they have some great, ways for you to get tickets for not that much money, such as last minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. You can get flash deals. You can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event, just real quick deals that you can get before the event. Or you can get zone deals. So what you can do is just select the section that you want to sit in, and Gametime will pick the seat for you and give you a deeper discount that way. On top of that, if you want to be picky, you can get seat views. You can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. And in case you're worried, like, oh, what if I find a lower price somewhere else? They have the lowest price guarantee. So Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference if you find lower prices somewhere else. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, and I'm back in to keep talking through Tom Thibodeau, the coach of the Knicks. He's going to be around until 2027 to 28, which I don't think it's a coincidence that if I'm not mistaken, that is Jalen Brunson's opt-out year. If I'm getting that correct, there's a lot of things I think that fall into place here as far as how this Knicks roster is constructed, and now how their coach is signed up. So I think that they definitely plan some of that all around Jalen Brunson and around this core and what they hope to accomplish. So as far as things I would kind of like to see Thibs accomplish this year, because I think the best thing about this run with him is that he has shown the ability to adapt. I mentioned towards the end of the last segment some of the things that he's done that have not just made things better for the Knicks, but have changed, the way that things are going around the NBA. This time around with the Knicks, I think that he's shown a great ability to assess himself a little more in the mirror, look himself in the mirror and say, what am I doing well? What am I not doing well? I think that was part of what doomed him in Minnesota a bit, was the fact that he was a little too rigid, and it got on the players' nerves. It got clearly on ownership's nerves and, the front office's nerves at a certain point, in which ultimately led to him, getting canned there, despite the fact that he took that franchise and brought them back to the playoffs too, with Jimmy Butler and Karl Towns and all that stuff. So, things that I hope to see Thibs do with the Knicks this year. I would actually, for all the talk of, and my own talk of how the 9-man rotation has sort of been the saving grace for this team the last couple of years, I would love if Thibs could figure out how to run a 10-man rotation again. And I think that the biggest problem with Thibs when he was running 10-man rotations before, and this was one of my biggest concerns with him earlier on in his Knicks tenure, is he treats 10-man rotations like hockey shifts. He thinks that he has to get all 5 guys out that were starters by within a minute or two of when he makes his first sub. And then he thinks that he's got to get all the starters back in within a minute or two once he starts, filtering the starters back in. And it just results in, you essentially just have 2 units. You never do any mixing and matching. You have the starters and you have the bench. And that's just how Thibs looks at it. And, maybe this team is deep enough that would work this season. Like if your starters were Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Julius Randle, Mitchell Robinson, and then your bench was, Tyler Kolek, let's just say Deuce McBride, Dante DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, and Precious Achiuwa. Maybe that works because that's actually 2 groups of really talented players. But I think more importantly, it would just be, I think that he could mix and match that and have Mikal Bridges play, a longer shift and be the last man that gets out, but then still putting in, a full 5-man swap at some point, but just having more overlap where the starter stays out there longer, or have Julius Randle stay out there longer with with the bench guys, and maybe actually do it where you have Deuce, Dante, Josh Hart, Julius Randle, and Precious Achiuwa out there for a bit, and let Julius kind of run with the bench unit, and then swap Julius out for Kolek just for a few minutes to give Jalen Brunson a little extra rest. You can have that full bench lineup out there for a minute or two, and then start filtering those other starters back in. So start getting Mikal Bridges back in, and start getting OG Anunoby back in, or whatever. I think that there's a way to make this work, and I think that after this past season, it would be best, one, to get as many guys as you think are viable NBA players minutes as possible, just in case the worst happens and you deal with injuries or whatever in the postseason, which I think we can safely say, not just for the Knicks, but like every team in the NBA deals with injuries in the postseason. So, I think that having guys ready to go is the best possible strategy there. And then also just being able to experiment with more players, see who works with who, and having a better idea. And then maybe some cream rises to the top there, and you have a player, maybe it's Kolek or something that you didn't expect to get bigger minutes that then kind of demands bigger minutes. And, you adjust accordingly to make that happen. I doubt that would happen because I don't think the Tibbs trust rookies all that often to play huge minutes. But, I do think that there's a world where you can, mix and match guys more if you just expand out to 10 man. And, that might not mean that guys are going to put up the most eye-popping stats or, guys are not going to put up the most eye-popping minutes numbers, which, as far as Tibbs is concerned, I guess that's good. Maybe that would affect the national media narrative finally if he has a bunch of guys averaging like 20 something minutes per game. But, I think then you keep legs fresher throughout the season, reduce that risk of potential injury and all that stuff. And, if you can keep guys to around 32 minutes a game maximum, something like that, and just let them maximize their time on the floor, I think you'd be in pretty good shape. So, I think it would just be a good idea for Tibbs to take advantage of the great depth that the Knicks have and try to keep legs fresh. Then the other thing would be continuing to experiment with OG at the five ish. I say five ish because he's not. The rebounding role for him wouldn't necessarily be the five. He'd probably be out there with Julius Randle, I think, in this instance. But if you have Julius out there to gobble up the rebounds, and you have OG out there to kind of play rim protector, there's a viable way to play small. And we saw it for brief stretches, like during the Sixers series and stuff. But I think it could work for the Knicks. Like I really do think that this is something that they can experiment with more and won't get run off the floor with. And we'll have plenty of shooting out there, have enough rim protection and enough rebounding if you have Julius and OG out there at the 4-5, however you want to delineate that. And then you can just have like Jalen Brunson, Dante DiVincenzo, Mikal Bridges out there. And that's just like shooting on shooting on shooting, offense on offense. And, the obviously the two guys at the 4-5 there and OG and Randall are no slouches on offense. You can have Julius handle the ball sometimes against fives, be able to break down the defense, kick it out to the perimeter, and just have four lights out 40% shooters there. I mean, there's just so much possibility there. So, I hope that going small is something that he continues to experiment with, especially now that, we've kind of seen OG in a limited capacity, at least, work as the rim protector. So hopefully that's something we see more of there. And then I guess what's left to talk about now is what the standards are for Tibbs, what the goal is now for this team with Tibbs as as the head of it, and what his standards are going to be that he's going to be held to for the rest of this deal. So I want to talk about that in just a second. All right, and I'm back in to finish talking through Tibbs again, extended through the 2027 to 28 season, according to Woj of ESPN. And now we're to the point where I'd like to talk about what the standards are for Tibbs now. It's when he came in, it was establish a culture. It was get this team viable again, and make it an attractive destination, and raise the floor of this team and whatever. And I think a lot of people, myself included, initially thought thought of the Tibbs hire and said, you know, maybe there were some higher upside candidates out there, but ultimately this guy will come in and he will make this franchise, legit again. He'll raise the win total. He'll make guys look better, by you could say like with the minute load and all that stuff. Like he kind of showcases guys in a certain way, and certainly made Julius Randle look like a superstar that first year and whatever, and helped the Knicks achieve an unlikely 4 seed. And then obviously we saw how they kind of faltered in the playoffs because they just didn't have enough firepower, and then the second year things kind of hit the fan. But now these last 2 years, I think we've seen like Tibbs is a little more than a floor raiser at this point. Like, I think that he's a ceiling raiser. I think that there's a real case that he could win a championship with this core that he has right now, because he's shown enough adaptability at this point. He's shown the ability to play the chess match in the postseason and go toe to toe with Nick Nurse in the first round this past year, went toe to toe with Rick Carlisle in the second round this past year, and you know realistically could have had the Knicks, with their skeleton crew in the Eastern Conference Finals against the eventual champions, had things not kind of hit the fan in that final game against Indiana. And so, as far as what the standards are for Tibbs now, I think it is. I mean, it's harsh. The guy just signed, but it's pretty much championship or bust at this point. I think that the Knicks are going to have a certain window, which is probably Tibbs's contract right now, to try to compete for a championship here. And, do they see it through with him if they are getting the same results for the next couple seasons? I don't know the answer to that question. I think that there's a decent chance that they let him ride this deal out. And, maybe if he hits the end of this deal, then Jalen Brunson will be 30 or just over 30. Mikal Bridges will be about the same age, obviously. Same with Josh Hart, same with Dante DiVincenzo, if they're still all with the team, and you'll have the younger guys you just drafted, those many years older, hopefully ready to contribute, like a Paco Dadier. OG will be about 30 years old as well. I mean, they've got a lot of guys that are in their like mid to late 20s at this point. So there's a real prime window to take advantage of here. And, I think it's going to be on Tibbs to figure out how to turn this team into a championship contender at this point. And, part of that will be, luck plays a part. I don't think that Tibbs contributed to the injuries this year, contrary to what anyone wants to say, with like, oh, he ran these guys into the ground and that's why they all got injured. No, he didn't. Like, the Knicks did not have a single player that finished in the top 10 in minutes last year. And I think Jalen Brunson was the only one in the top 15. They did not have any guys in the minutes per game category that were playing, exorbitant amounts of minutes. Not like his first couple of years when Julius Randle by far led the league in minutes. Like his first year, he and RJ Barrett were in the top like 5 their first 2 years together. He's moved beyond that at this point. So I don't think that's a thing anymore. But I think that he's got to find a way to turn this team into a championship core at this point. And then, I do think, and again, this is harsh. I've been singing his praises this whole episode, but I do think that at a certain point, if you go like 2 more seasons and the furthest Tibbs gets is like the second round with this core that they've invested a lot in, they've invested a lot of first round picks into Mikal Bridges finally, to make that sort of all in move and, set this team up. Like, if they're not at least making Eastern Conference Finals appearances, over these next couple seasons, I think you can make a real argument for like, all right, maybe Tibbs did kind of finally reach his ceiling, and the Knicks need to, whoever it may be, I don't know who the coach would be at that point, but like find their version of going to like a Steve Kerr, that, you go from a Mark Jackson who reestablished the culture and, got the team, into like the 50-win territory and all that, and, made them much better. And then you go get the guy that's going to elevate that team to the next level, take them to the championship level, whether that's their version of Steve Kerr, their version of Michael Malone, their version of, Nick Nurse when he was with Toronto, whatever the case may be. Like, actually, that's a really good example is the fact that they promoted Nick Nurse and went on to win a championship. It helped that they had Kawhi Leonard as well. But, there's a case to be made that, if Tibbs can't take them past a certain point, then maybe you start looking for who the coach is that could, because I do think the Knicks have a championship capable core at this point. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know at what point they would look to potentially do that, but I don't think it will be anytime soon. And I think Tibbs definitely deserves a chance to make this thing happen and potentially win a title with this team. So, whatever the future may hold, we're going to be here to cover it for you. And, I am overall, even though I just ended on sort of a sour note, overall, I'm happy the Knicks, re-signed Tibbs and are going to keep him around for a number of years. I've really grown to like the guy. I really have grown to admire, what he's done with coaching this team and what he's managed to get out of his players and everything else. And I'm excited to see what comes next. So we'll see. We'll be here with you guys on Locked On Knicks to get into it whenever it happens. But until then, thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace out.